Greetings and salutations! Welcome to the EzeeLinux Show. This is version 18.8, recorded February the 10th, 2018. I'm Joe Collins, and today we are going to talk about Elementary OS and KDE Neon, two distributions of Linux that you can download and install on your computer, and they are very different from what we usually talk about on this channel. Before we get into that, I want to remind everybody that the EzeeLinux Acer 1 Valentine's Day giveaway is still going on. Coming up here on February the 14th, we're going to have a drawing, and some lucky person is going to win this Acer 1 netbook you see pictured on your screen. It comes preloaded with Linux Mint. I've already talked about what the machine is all about. It's kind of a fun little toy computer. 2 gigabytes of RAM, a 2-core mobile Intel CPU, and it has a 32 gigabyte eMMC embedded SD card for storage. Unfortunately, the storage and the RAM are not upgradable, but it runs Linux Mint quite well, so when you get it, that's what it's going to have on it. The two things to keep in mind if you want to enter the contest: number one, you must be a resident of the continental United States. I am not shipping this out of the country. Number two, you must provide me with a verifiable address that you can receive parcels at. And how do you do that? You go to the EzeeLinux.com page, just EzeeLinux.com, go to Contact Us, choose the topic Acer 1 giveaway, and put your address in the box and fill out all of the other information. That is all you got to do. And all of the entries are going into a hat, which is actually a directory. And I am going to use the shuffle command to choose one of those entries completely at random. And when I do that, I will announce the winner. So that's actually how I'm going to do the contest. I'm going to just have the terminal run the shuffle command and then spit out some output, and whoever comes up, they get the computer. I mean, it can't be more random than that, right? So also keep in mind that I'm not going to be saving your address. I'm not going to be spamming you. I'm not putting it in a database. Don't worry about your privacy, because as soon as the contest is over, all of those entries just go poof. And if you want to find out more about the computer and the contest, you can look at the last video and the video before that, because I talked about it in more detail. So good luck to all of those folks who have already entered, and if you are going to enter, good luck to you as well. So let's go ahead and jump into our topic for this show, and we actually have two distributions of Linux to talk about. And the first one we're going to talk about is Elementary OS, and then we will be talking about KDE Neon. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this is because these are two distributions that in the past I have said I don't like. I would not recommend for people to use them. And in the case of KDE, I have publicly stated that I absolutely hate KDE. However, things have developed in kind of a weird way lately in the Linux community. The GNOME 3 desktop environment, which was recently adopted by Ubuntu as the default desktop for them to ship, has come under a lot of scrutiny because of the fact that they have had some stability issues. We have problems with extensions, and also the project seems to be on a tear where they want to keep removing features from the desktop itself and pushing them into plugins and extensions, and in other words, they won't just come shipped by default. You'd have to set them up. And a lot of folks have been talking about other alternatives, things that are not GNOME. Now, most of the people who watch this channel are new to Linux, and most of you actually use Linux Mint of some flavor or another. So, you know, I mean, I don't like doing just distro reviews to do distro reviews, but I also want to kind of let you guys know what else is out there. And the reason why I'm looking at these two in specifica is because of the, what do you say? I don't know what that, it's made up a word, I think. The reason why I'm looking at these two is because a lot of people that I have a great deal of respect for are saying really good things about them, even though I personally have looked at them in the past and went, it's not ready, I don't like it for whatever reason. Matt Hartley, for instance, is very happy about Elementary OS, and then not too long ago I was hearing another podcast where Martin Wimpress and Alan Pope, who both work for Canonical and are also the founders of the Ubuntu Mate project were saying really nice things about KDE Neon. And I'm like, okay, let's go take a look at that. So that's what we're doing in this video today. This may not be your cup of tea. Elementary OS is certainly not my cup of tea, that is for sure. Elementary OS is a desktop environment plus a framework that developers can develop applications for. The project was launched on the 31st of March 2011, so it's been around for about 6 years, and it features what they call the Pantheon desktop, and it is a fork of the GNOME 3 desktop, but it has been developed separately from GNOME. It does share some things in common with it even to this day, and they have forked a whole bunch of basic applications that they maintain. So for instance, their text editor is called Scratch, and their media player is called Noise, or it's a music player rather, and then they have Mail, which is based on Geary Mail. And so they not only create a desktop environment with a theme on it, they're actually creating their own applications and creating an environment for people to be able to contribute to the Elementary OS desktop, their own applications. Now when you go to their main page here, you'll see that they ask for a donation right up front. And this is one of the controversial things that Elementary has kind of gotten a little bit of flack for from certain sectors of the open source community, is that they have been very upfront about the fact that, you know, funding is a big deal in an open source project, and they want to make it possible for people who develop this software to get something out of it other than a pat on the head and gee, what a nice job. So they kind of put that right up front. Now you can put 0 in here and go ahead and download Elementary OS, but if you're actually going to be using it and liking it, consider throwing them $1 or $2. There are people in the open source world that for one reason or the other think that when you say something is open source, that means it should be absolutely free of charge and you should just give it away and you should just do it out of the goodness of your heart and all that stuff. And that's nice in a utopian, you know, unicorns and rainbows world, but the actual reality is that if anybody's going to put any major work into any sort of an application or whatever, they're going to have to get something out of it that will help to maintain them as they work on it. It's just the way it is, gang. So funding is always a big deal with open source projects. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I totally agree with everything that the Elementary OS project has done in that direction. All I am saying is that that is an issue that they're working on. And they're trying to make sure that people who develop for they have some incentive to develop, basically. So let's go ahead and get off the page. You guys can look this up yourself. I'm going to put these pages in the the description for the video. Have fun. We're going to actually get into the operating system itself. Now what you are looking at in this video is slightly modified from what you get when you first install it, okay? I have changed up the desktop a little bit. I put a dark theme on it because I think it works better for videos. I've also increased the font size. Other than that, this is what you get. So it's very simple, very basic. Elementary OS does not have an active desktop. You cannot create icons here. Right-clicking your mouse, center-clicking, doesn't do anything to the desktop. They have just completely gotten rid of that particular feature. So if you're somebody who just absolutely has to have an active desktop, Elementary OS is not for you. There's actually no way to turn it on. And it comes with a very few applications installed with the system. We have a calendar that's built in, and then over here we have settings. So it's very similar to GNOME 3 in that regard, that it's laid out that way, but this is not GNOME 3. We're looking at Pantheon. Down here we have a dock, and this is how you work your, really the main way that you interact with your programs. You can put whatever you want down here. And let's go ahead and let's open up a terminal. I want to see how much memory we're using. I did install htop as well. So let's see what that does. And I booted it up, so it's saying, let me make this it's all squished together. Let's see here. Well, we're using about 542 megabytes, including the terminal running. So that's pretty lightweight, especially when you compare it to the GNOME desktop, which uses almost a gig when it boots up. So like I said, we have some simple applications down here, and the whole idea behind elementary is just that everything is just stupid simple. There's very, very little configuration available. So if we go here to, let's go to, where is the settings? Right there. You see that there's just not much here. Very simple, straightforward settings. Now, what I was able to do to get this on a dark theme and adjust the fonts and all that stuff was I installed GNOME Tweak Tool. I don't know whether that is standard procedure with elementary. They may have their own tool, but I just decided that I would do that. Elementary OS is based on Ubuntu 16.04 LTS, and future versions will be based on Ubuntu 18.04 for the base. So I knew it was in there, and I did it, and it worked. I didn't even look that up. I just went and saw that. So this is basically elementary OS, and probably the biggest feature in elementary OS is the App Center. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And we go, well, I thought I clicked it. It didn't jump up and down. So the App Center is really where you're supposed to get the applications. This is also where you can find applications that are specifically designed to run with elementary from developers who contribute to the project. And some of those applications are paid. So let's look at audio, for instance. So we get a lot of the things that you would find in Ubuntu. Of course, anything in the Ubuntu repositories runs on elementary. You can install whatever you want. You can remove all of the applications that they give you and put in whatever you want. This is actually a really nice application. And the Pop OS, which is the stock OS that comes with System 76 computers these days, they actually have their own little distribution. They have a thing in there called Pop Shop, which is developed very much like the elementary OS App Center. So they look very similar. I think when I did talk about Pop OS, I mistakenly said that that was based on GNOME software. No, it has to do with this application right here called, this is the App Center. This works really quite well. I have played with it a little bit, and of all of these like big graphic software applications, this one seems to work the best that I've seen. Probably the only thing that would be better than this would be the Software Boutique that comes with Ubuntu Mate. So that's elementary OS, folks. I just showed you the operating system. There's nothing else in here. There's no mystery to it. There's no convoluted nothing. This is it. And if you need a very basic, simple system that you can use as a springboard to do other things, this would seem to me to be really good for laptops. And I've said that about it in the past, that especially ones that you're going to hand to your kids or something like that. The only thing about it that I don't like, and the reason why I just don't like desktops like this, is that people who do need to do things like increase font size for accessibility, that sort of thing, if you need to change the theme or something like that, you're going to have to go off and hunt and see if you can figure out how to do that. Go online and go to look in forums and things like that. If you want to jump outside of what they want you to do, then that's what you have to do. But maybe you don't need to do that. Maybe as it is perfect for you. You don't mind the brighter theme. You don't want, don't care about those sorts of things. Then there you go. You just install it, install the software that you need, and keep rocking down the road. You take care of your updates through the App Center. It seems to do that quite well. So yes, I can see why somebody would want to use this. And like I said, when I first heard folks going, oh, you got to check out elementary, it's really cool, I was like, there's nothing to elementary. I think that's part of the charm, actually, for a lot of folks, is that they can shape it and mold it and make it whatever they want it to be. Elementary is based on GTK. I do not know how it does with Qt applications, which is something that we're going to be talking about when we get to KDE Neon here in a minute. I think it's probably a really good idea to stop a moment and talk about the difference between GTK and Qt, because that's something you hear tossed around a lot when it comes to desktop environments. Are they based on GTK, Qt? What does that mean? Okay, they're toolkits, gang. What it is that if you want to develop a piece of software, let's say that you want to write a piece of software here like noise. and I'm not going to see much when I open it up. You can use a toolkit to provide things like buttons and menus and the stuff you see across the screen here. You know, what's up here in the menu bar and all this, they come in a graphics toolkit. And so the developer can just work with those particular things and label them as they need them to be, and then they come up with a graphic application. So you know, it allows them to do windows, boxes, show pictures, whatever, it doesn't matter. And in the Linux world, we have two major toolkits that we deal with. One of them is GTK, which is normally associated with GNOME. GTK is also associated with desktops that use a lot of GNOME elements, like the Mate project, which is based on GNOME 2, or forked from GNOME 2 rather. And then you have things like XFCE, which is actually separate, but it borrows a lot from the GNOME project. So people think in terms of GTK for those desktops. And then we have Qt, which is associated mainly with the KDE project we're going to get into in a little bit. And the problem is that on GNOME desktops in particular, it seems to me that they sometimes have a really hard time working with Qt applications. I haven't tried it with elementary OS. I don't know what the Qt integration looks like. Qt integration is really great on Linux Mint, for instance, like the Cinnamon desktop environment as it is put out by Linux Mint has a great deal of Qt integration, so you really don't know whether you're running a Qt app next to a GTK. You can't really tell by looking what it is. So that's something that I always look at with desktops, is their integration. But anyway, so let's move on from elementary OS. I mean, you can go and you can check it out for yourself, and there's a lot of stir going on, people talking about how cool they are. So I always do this, and I'm going to do it right. To exit HTOP, use the Q button. Now it does it. Now I can close the terminal. So I did that right. So that's elementary OS. Let's move on to KDE. First, we'll talk a little bit about the project. Now, when you talk about KDE, you're talking about the oldest Linux, Unix desktop environment that there is. And when I say desktop environment, there were desktops before this, but there's nothing like before KDE came along. There really wasn't anything like it, because not only does the KDE project provide a desktop of sorts with the Plasma desktop, they also have a framework, which is, like I said, it's something that developers can use to create applications, and they also provide a suite of applications, most of them starting with K. So it's like a complete operating environment beyond the operating system itself. And it's been around for quite some time. As a matter of fact, I didn't know it started in 1996. So it was launched on October the 14th, 1996. That's 21 years ago. Let me tell you what, folks. In 1996, I was running Windows 3.11 at work and writing automation software to run on Windows 3.11 and DOS 6 that we were running at that time. I think 6.22 was out by then, DOS 6.22, which was the last stable version of DOS. But if not, it was DOS 5 or 6. It was something like that. And that's what I was doing at that time, was writing automation software. So the idea of a total desktop environment that's mind-blowing. But we didn't, you know, I wasn't into the whole open source Linux scene at that time. So you can go and read about KDE. Now, this is one that I have to kind of eat a little bit of crow about, because I have actually covered this distribution a couple of times, and the last time I did it, I was really excited about it because this desktop has gotten better and better. When you're talking about KDE version 4, for instance, I didn't like it at all. It appeared to be slow because of the way it was set up. You had vast pages full of all of these different radio buttons and settings and things like that, and it was overwhelming. I just couldn't understand why somebody would want to use it. But nowadays, we're on like 5.12, which is the very latest version, and that's what we're going to be looking at. And the KDE project has done a lot to still keep the desktop very versatile, but at the same time, what they have done is they have made it pretty easy to approach and get into the way the settings are laid out. So you know, I always say that one of the reasons I like Cinnamon is it's halfway between GNOME, which has no configuration, and KDE, which has too much. Well, the KDE project has kept all of this lovely configuration that they offer, but they have made it a little easier to work with. Now, my main problem with this has always been that I get really excited about it and I get it all configured the way I want it, and then for some reason it stops working. The last time that I actually used KDE Neon, I spent like 2 days playing with it, tinkering with it. I had it themed up exactly the way I wanted. I had the desktops all laid out. It was beautiful. I was taking advantage of all these different things, and I had poked around and looked at all the settings. And I set the thing up, and then one day I booted up the computer and all my settings were gone. And I didn't do anything to get rid of them. They just disappeared. So that kind of made me mad. So I've been telling people since then, like, man, just stay away from it, man. It'll bite you. I've been assured, though, by many people in the community that that problem has been addressed. So maybe that will not be an issue if you want to try this out. So the idea behind KDE Neon, there's another thing that's interesting about it, and we will look at the desktop here in just a second, but I want to point this out. It is based on Ubuntu 16.04. It's based on the long-term support version of Ubuntu, but what they use from Ubuntu is the base. They do not use any part of the GNOME desktop, the Unity desktop, any desktop. They take care of all of that. And you got to remember that for a very long time, KDE was a project that provided a desktop and provided software. They did not provide an operating system. So it's very interesting that they decided to go ahead and put this out. They claim it's not necessarily a distribution, it's simply a vehicle for the KDE project, so people can you know, use the GNOME desktop. But if you're running Ubuntu LTS under it, folks, it's a distribution. It's actually kind of neat, because if you choose the right version, then you can get the latest version of the desktop, you know, have the latest KDE applications that come in, sort of like a rolling release, but then you'll have that base. As a matter of fact, the one that I chose was the user edition, and then we have the LTS edition here. They have several editions available. So, but I think it's really neat that you have a project that did this. There was some talk many years ago about GNOME putting out their own distribution of Linux. So here we go. It's the KDE Plasma desktop. Once again, the only changes that have really been made to this desktop are that, number one, I have increased the font size to make it easier to see for me and for you, and I have switched to the Breeze Dark theme everywhere. KDE desktop in its current state, very, very lightweight. 380 something megabytes of memory is being used. All I did was boot this up and then open up that HTOP in the console, which is the name of the terminal application that comes with KDE. So let's talk about all the really good things going on in here and what I really like about it. First of all, the latest version, and this is 5.12, the long-term support version of the desktop, has the you know, functioning icons here. Whether they call this folder view or what it's called in there, I don't know what the deal is, but I like it. So if I right click here, I've got all kinds of options and I can do all kinds of stuff. I can create files and whatnot. Now, the last time that I played around with this, I didn't have this set up this way. What I had was like they had like a widget that sat on the desktop, and then you could you know, make that be your home directory or whatever. This is how you can install widgets and mess around with the desktop. There's just like settings here, settings there, settings everywhere. That's one of the things about KDE. And you may find that if you have used GNOME-based desktops that KDE looks and smells and acts differently. That's because it grew up a completely different way. It's evolved differently. So for instance, KDE goes by the idea that everything is a web page. So if I open up the home directory here, this is the file manager that comes with KDE, and this is one of the nicest file managers in the Linux world. This is Dolphin. And Dolphin is, you can do so much with it. It's actually really cool. Like for instance, if I hit Control and just put my mouse in there, I'm resizing the icons, which is really nice. You can choose whether you want to see previews of pictures or not right here. It just goes on and on the settings. But one of the things that trips people up, and I have Talked about this in past videos, and everybody is always quick to point out, oh, you can turn that off, you can change that, is that to open up the documents directory, for instance, it's a single click. It's not a double click. You don't highlight it first and then, see, I'm opening up different directories just by single clicking. So it's just like a web page. This is just a link. If you right click here, then you will get a menu and it will highlight it. Let's see, I think if you right click it and hold it. See, that's the thing that I don't quite understand how you're supposed to do this is, how are you supposed to, or maybe you click there, that's right. You hover over it, and then you get that little box there, and if you click there, it'll highlight it, and if you click down here, it'll open it. So that's how it works. So yeah, it takes a little bit of getting used to if you're used to how Windows does it, for instance, and how the GNOME desktop does it by default. KDE just has it where it's a single click. But I mean, these are things that you could get used to. The other thing about it would be like shortcuts, where, for instance, with a GNOME desktop, to switch between different desktops, like virtual desktops, you would use alternate control and the arrow keys, either up or down or sideways. Well, that doesn't work in KDE. So I think what it is, it's Control F2 takes you to another desktop. I don't think I have desktops set up. Let me see here. No, that's... Nope, I don't think so. Well, it's doing different things. It's not what it's supposed to do. So I don't have desktops set up in here yet. I think we just have one. So that's another thing. Like you can go in here and tell it, okay, how many virtual desktops would you like? 2, 3, 4, whatever. Let's take a look around in the settings, because there's a lot to absorb here about KDE. Now, this desktop is based on Qt. Remember, we were talking about toolkits for developers. This is a Qt-based desktop. And one of the things that I like about GNOME is that they make integrating GTK applications, which here are, you know, when we're in GNOME, we're in a Qt environment from the base, or rather we're in a, okay, stop, think. In GNOME, you're in GTK all the time. A Qt application, it needs to have Qt support. When you're running KDE, you are in Qt all the time. So that means that if you're running a GTK application, then it has to be able to support that. So, for instance, here, when we go to Appearance, the themes and whatnot, I'm not going to look at all that, but if you go to Application Style here, and then we go to, well, now they used to say GTK, but they've changed this now to GNOME Applications. You can change the theme for your GNOME applications, and you can have different themes, or they're handled separately. So you could have this be, I mean, if for some reason you wanted your GNOME applications to look different, you could do that, but I've just set everything to Breeze Dark. You can set the fonts independently here for these applications, and I think that's kind of cool because they just break it out. They say, okay, look, you know, if something changes or whatever, you can change it yourself. So that's pretty cool. Now, why did I close that? Would you open that back up? Thank you very much. There's so much to talk about in KDE that it's insane. And I'm going to play with it here in the virtual machine. You have no idea how tempted I am to load this onto a computer somewhere and really get into playing with it, because it's changed from the last time I looked at it. It has gotten better. And, okay, for instance, the window manager in KDE is KWin, and they are working very hard to get Wayland integration that actually works. So right now when you load it up, the default is still X, but they're working on Wayland, whereas Wayland and GNOME don't quite get along very well. I mean, if you loaded Ubuntu 17.10 and ran it with Wayland, you figured that out for yourself pretty fast, whereas they're working for, you know, the KDE project's doing really good Wayland support. And for those of you who don't know, we're talking about display servers here, which is what actually draws the picture on the screen. For the entire history of Linux, it's been X. X goes back before Linux. It was developed in the 80s, for instance, whereas Wayland is a replacement for X, and X is, you know, it has new technology, Wayland does, over X, and we're in a transition period right now. So that's for people who don't know. So yeah, I mean, you can see how the settings, they have a lot of settings to deal with, but boy, they have made it easy to work with them. And they have all kinds of applications in here that really, they have one that helps you like sync with your phone. I don't know a great deal about it because I've never played with it. And so, I mean, if you want to learn more about that, you can. Now, the KDE Neon distribution comes with this really, really nice application here called Discover. And that helps you find all kinds of different applications within KDE, the KDE applications that are available. So, I mean, some of the applications that you'll find here may be unfamiliar to you if you've been using GNOME for a long time. If you've been using like Ubuntu or Linux Mint or something like that, you may see applications that you've never heard of before. But don't worry, your favorite applications, they will run here. I mean, you can run pretty much anything you need to. So they have a text editor called Kate, which is, a lot of people run it outside of KDE that don't have KDE Desktop. There's KDN Live, which is the video editor that a lot of people talk about. Console is the terminal. But this gives you complete access to the world of KDE if you want to take a look at it here. This also handles deb packages. So because this is Ubuntu based, when you download a deb package like for Google Chrome or TeamViewer or something like that, then it will open up in this particular application and it will install, so you don't need to have GDebi installed. It works just fine, unlike a lot of solutions like the GNOME software solution for that. GNOME software doesn't really work well when installing deb packages, but this one seems to work quite well. And by the way, so did the App Center and Elementary OS. They seem to work just fine with that. So yeah, I invite you to, if you're curious and you want to do something new, you can take a look here. These different widgets available for the desktop. We can put a clock on here. Let's go ahead and launch it. See if it shows up. Well, that didn't work the way I thought it would. That's okay. I probably need to go over here and install it. But we've talked enough about this anyway. You see, my mind just sort of fries when I get on this stage in the video because there is literally so much to talk. Hey, I didn't want to do that. Working in a virtual machine, my mouse gets a little wonky. There's so much to talk about, and I know that I have forgotten some things, but my main thing with KDE has always been not that I didn't think that the technology was cool. My problem has always been the fact that it's always been really unstable for me, and I've never been able to stick to it for very long. But boy, this one is so nice. It just tempts me like crazy to put this on and give it a whirl on hardware. So both the Elementary OS and KDE Neon come with just bare bones applications. So if you're starting out with Linux Mint, Linux Mint comes with an Office suite. It comes with pretty much everything you need. They don't have that here. So you're going to have to be a little bit more in tune with what applications you need to make things work. So for instance, if you want to install LibreOffice here, then you would have to install LibreOffice and you would have to configure it. You'd also have to install a package called MyThes, MyThes, and like English US or something like that to get a thesaurus working. See, usually in Linux Mint or Ubuntu that comes shipped with that application installed, that's already set up for you. Whereas if you install it yourself, you have to kind of hunt for some packages to get features to work. So I wouldn't necessarily say that KDE Neon was great for newbies because they're going to have to find the software that they need, and if they don't know what they're looking for, then it could get real confusing fast. There's thousands and thousands of applications available. One last thing about KDE before we wrap up the video that I really like is this kicker menu. This has been around for a long time in many different forms, and it goes way back, but this one is really awesome. And you can see you have your categories down here. You can look at all of the applications that are installed on your system. You can set up your favorites. You can look at documents. It's just amazing what you can do here. Look at your history, what you have done with the system. You can lock, suspend, get out, all kinds of things. And then set up your favorites to do whatever you want. Also, you can just, and this is something that's actually kind of new to KDE, is that you can just hit the super key and open it. For many, many, many years, that's not the way KDE worked, and then the project relented and said, you know, so many people are now used to hitting that super key to open a menu that's now baked in. Thank you, KDE. But you can open this and just start typing, and it'll take you to anything on the computer, sort of like the way the GNOME desktop works with Tracker. When you open up the activities menu, you can just start typing and it'll take you to any application anywhere on the system. So that's pretty awesome. All right, I'm done. We're going to move on now. We're going to say goodbye. Your feedback is always welcome. Please be sure to give EzeeLinux a like on Facebook. Yes, I can say that. We can also check out EzeeLinux.com and check out FreedomPenguin.com for more about Linux. It's just, tongue-tied, and I would appreciate it if you do. A lot of really cool things happening over on Freedom Penguin right now. A lot of cool articles. My content is being syndicated. Other folks' video content is being syndicated. Matt is contributing a lot of stuff. So we have lots of articles, videos, all kinds of crazy content happening over there. And it's a wonderful community that's coming together at freedompenguin.com. So do check that out. Thank you for watching. We will do this again soon. Later. That's stupid. Am I really going to end this video with later? No, I'm not. I'm going to say, how about bye-bye for now. Ciao. See you on the coast. Yeah, I like that one.